Good morning, everybody. Right now I'm coming to you live at 11:30 in the morning on Tuesday, January 20th. And I just got a new Generation X t-shirt. I'll show you the picture. I'll include the link on the page of this video so you can get it if you want it. I just got it. Had to order it from Amazon. I'll show you the image so I don't have to stand up. But it says Generation X, raised on hose water and parental neglect, which is definitely true for my generation. Another thing that I think about with regard to Generation X that's actually useful, regardless of one's generation or one's current time, so to speak. A phrase that I learned from some of our neighbors when I was a kid, like 10 years old, 11 years old. I remember, all these stories are at least somewhat interesting. But anyway, I'll give you the short version. Where we lived, kind of in the neighborhood behind our house, so to speak, because we lived on kind of a main street. One of my friends was Alfred, and he had a cousin that was visiting him, and he taught me a phrase. Again, this would have been like 1980, give or take a year. But he taught me a phrase that's stayed with me for my entire life. So I'm going to share that with you right now and invite you to see if you might also use this phrase. And the phrase, oh, by the way, I realize I'm bouncing around a little bit, but I also want to connect this phrase with something with a philosophical context. So you all know that I love Nietzsche and even books about Nietzsche's books. One of those is one that I've shared previously, narrated by Charlton Heston, who, for those of you who don't know, is or was a very famous American actor and also a narrator. And in that production, which was actually written by Richard Schott, who is a professor emeritus of philosophy at University of University of Illinois, he said something in that review of Nietzsche's work, which is a really amazing quote. And I've loved the quote. It's really harsh, and that's why I'm putting it in this context. But I think when the quote stands by itself, it's actually somewhat useless because it could be misapplied in so many different ways. But it applies perfectly in the way that I'm contextualizing it right now. So that's why I want to share that. It's a brutally hard quote with the phrase that I learned from our neighbors back in the 1980s or whatever. And I think you'll see how these connect together in a way that's actually useful. Because like I said, the original quote from Richard Schott in his review of Nietzsche's work, the entire work is brilliant, but I have to say, and it's so obvious that even he would have to admit, in a few occasions within that review, he says a few things that are simply incendiary, and maybe that's because he was trying to get his students to wake up, or he was trying to, initiate a discussion among the students or the class or whatever. So he says a few things in that review, which is otherwise spectacular, that are a little bit wrong or a little bit inflammatory. So here's what he says. I'm going to give you the exact quote because the words go together so perfectly. I couldn't help but memorize it, 25 years ago. So here's what he says, and then I'm going to apply it to the context that I've already introduced now. He says, "The enhancement of life requires the creative efforts of people with exceptional powers. They must be strong enough, at least, to be capable of harming others. Otherwise, they will lack the strength to create." Since I obviously still have the audiobook, in fact, I even have the audio cassette. Actually, look, it's right here. But I have it in digital format now. I'll see if I can provide the exact excerpt in case you want to hear it from Charlton Heston instead of my own voice. But I bought this audio cassette in 1999 in Seattle, Washington, when I was out on a random bike ride, and it was lightning from the first moment I put it into my Sony Walkman and started listening to it. Those of you in Generation X will know exactly what I'm talking about. So, yeah, there it is. And I've mentioned before, the audio cassette is more complete than the digital versions because they basically screwed it up. So an audio cassette can hold 90 minutes of information. But when they switch technology from audio cassettes to CDs, a CD can only hold about 72 minutes of information. So they had to shave off at least a good 18 minutes from the original production, which apparently was designed for audio cassettes at 90 minutes per cassette. However, when they made the digital version available, they used the version from the CD instead of using the complete version from the audio cassette. I guess because they had already cleaned up the audio. But for that reason, the digital version of this, CD or digital download, is remarkably shorter and incomplete compared to the original old school audio cassette that you're looking at right here. Okay, so like I said, a cousin from our neighbor Alfred taught me something that I'm going to teach you right now because it's had immense value in my life, even though I admit that I have failed to act on this. I have failed to implement this in my life, but I just implemented it right now. And that's why I'm thinking about it. So the phrase that he taught me is, sometimes you just got to tell people to shut the fuck up, because a lot of times people talk a bunch of shit, which is another Generation X phrase, I suppose, and they're just going to talk their shit until someone tells them to shut up. And so before I move on, let me connect that with what I had said earlier from Richard Schott, and that is, the enhancement of life requires the creative efforts of people with exceptional powers. They must be strong enough at least to be capable of harming others, otherwise they will lack the strength to create. So here's where I'm connecting those together, and that is, in order for me to protect my space and my time and my tasks, at times, in order for me to succeed, not in a selfish way or a capitalist way or an exploitive way, but when I have to work with other people, one of the things I'm always progressively learning is that some people just suck at their jobs, and you have to basically tell them that they suck and that this isn't working out, and you got to go your way and I'm going my way, but this isn't working. So you've seen me talk about that before with accountants, with attorneys. I mean, accountants and attorneys for me are just fucking red flags these days because most of them just seem to suck at their jobs. And accountants for me, and over the last couple of years, have just been the worst group possible. I mean, I expect that they're going to fuck things up now. In the past, I thought, well, I'm a competent professional. I try to do good work. I assume that other people are the same, whether they're doctors or surgeons or accountants or attorneys or marketers or whatever. I assume they're going to at least perform reasonably competently, and contractors and carpenters as well. But the fact is, and I said this recently in a different post, a lot of people just suck at their jobs these days. And I think it's because of population-wide brain damage, too many injections, poor education, the deconstruction and collapse of social structure, which is highly relevant because in the past, students went to school, or they went to a mentor, or they went to a tradie school or whatever, institute, but they arrived at those opportunities of learning with a hierarchy in their mind and respect for their teachers. Now, nobody has hierarchy and nobody has respect. So teachers, and I've experienced this as well, especially when I was teaching in Spain. The United States is in bad shape, but Spain is actually in worse shape socially in many ways. Spain's great if you want to go and eat tapas and pinchos and drink wine and go to the beach and look at the architecture. Spain's awesome for that. But in terms of social structure for advancement, Spain basically has no future. And that's why they have such little industry. They basically survive off of tourism. So anyway, I reasonably expect with processed foods, poor education, corruption, collapse of social structure, that people are just going to become dumber and dumber all the time. And that's at least what I'm experiencing in a lot of my interactions, even among older people. The issue isn't necessarily one of generations, even though of course it is that. It's not exclusively that. The issue is that incompetence is normal now. Like when I was growing up, I remember in high school, like people who didn't perform, I went to military school, so it was a little more strict there, of course, but like students who didn't perform, they were called slackers. And nobody wanted to be a slacker. The ideal student was somebody who was athletic, somebody who could kick ass when necessary, because obviously, you know, in a boys' school, you would expect quite a bit of fistfights. And believe me, that happened. But the ideal student or the ideal badass was somebody who could kick ass, play sports, and do well in school. I don't know what kids look up to these days, but a lot of them seem to do close to nothing. And again, regardless of generation, I see that, like I just had to work with an older man this morning. He's older than I am, and he sucks at his job. And he sent me this long. This will be the last thing that I touch upon as an example. But he sent me an email or a message of 443 words, talking all this shit when he had failed at his job for the past 6 months. So we are precisely at 6 months and 2 days of this engagement, and he's fucked it up. And then he wants to send me this long-winded email talking about, oh, this and explanation here. I don't give a fuck. Your job is to do X, and you've failed for 6 months at X, and now it's time for us to separate and never talk to each other again. And I don't care. So I did tell him in my reply, and I wasn't like overly rude about it, but I did have to tell him to, in a sense, I had to tell him to shut up, because I don't need a fucking 443 word message when he should just say, look, we fucked up. We don't have a solution forward. We're going to disconnect from this engagement. We're sorry that we suck at our jobs. I mean, just say that. I don't need all this shit about how the market this and the price is this and the neighbors this and whatever the fuck. So again, like I said, the phrase that was running in my mind from a vernacular sense, which is kind of casual language, the casual language is, shut the fuck up. I don't need all this fucking explanation for a 6-month failure purely on his part. I mean, they failed at the job, so I don't need a big conversation about that. Just apologize, shut up, and let's end this. But again, that is in my opinion, a positive, even though it's rather harsh. It's a positive Generation X way of saying the enhancement of life requires the creative efforts of people with exceptional powers. But at times you have to be strong enough to hurt people's feelings. You have to be strong enough to say, I don't have any more fucks to give on this topic, and I got to move on to protect my life, to protect my family, to protect my financial interests. Because, like I've said before, I don't really give a big care about money, but I live in a world that's governed by money. I got to pay taxes, I got to pay attorneys, I got to pay accountants. Sometimes I have to pay twice, which is a different topic. But I've said before, I had an accountant from California last year that totally ripped me off. But I've also had accountants in other locations who failed at their jobs. I mean, they didn't even fill out the documents correctly. And as an example of their incompetence, they had to fill out a one-page declaration, and the numbers obviously had to coincide with each other. Well, they screwed up by 10 cents. They screwed up on one of the numbers that should have been the same number here and the same number here. They screwed it up because they mistyped the number by equivalent of about 10 cents worth of money. But for that reason, the government flagged and is now auditing the tax return because these guys screwed up a value of 10 cents, but it was enough to flag it because of the inconsistency, it got flagged. So anyway, yeah, I mean, you have to eventually tell people to shut up. I gotta go. This isn't working out. I can't waste any more time with this. By the way, that was a great line from another book that I've got. I actually have that one right behind me. If I can... Oh yeah, let's see if I can find it. It's in this book right here. Oh, hold on. I remember this from... Sorry. I remember this from... 30 years ago. So this is a publishing house that specializes in Jungian psychology. And this is a PhD psychologist who was basically, when he wrote this book, he was basically dying of metastatic melanoma, which of course is very unfortunate. But I read it and highlighted it in my typical style. And maybe I'll review this book in a separate video. But basically, he's coming to grips with his own dying. And at one point in the book, which obviously I'm looking for the exact quote, I know it has to be at the end of the book, but he says basically, I've got no more time for bullshit. And in his case, it was obviously true. but he said it in kind of a cute way that I'm trying to find. Maybe if I don't find it in time for this video, then I will take a picture of it and include it in the video. But I remember what he says. I just hope that I underlined it so I can actually see it. I'm sure I highlighted it, but I don't know if I highlighted it and underlined it, which is what I'm looking for. I don't see it right now. But he says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Periwinkle. I have no time for this. There is no power for me in this conversation." That's almost an exact quote, even though I changed it a little bit. But it's a great quote, and obviously it stayed with me now for 30 years. But, you know, all of us are dying, quickly or slowly, or whether we know it or not, or next month by accident, or who knows what. I mean, look at those 40 people that just died in Spain in a train accident. So we all should, and certainly have the right to, protect our time, whether we think we have 10 days or 10 years or 100 years more. We all have to protect our time. And I'm learning that more and more. You know, it's not like I didn't know it before, but I am certainly learning it as I am exposed to people who are just bullshitters. Like that, since I'm still looking for it, I'll mention again that I told this story on a couple of different videos. But like I had that accountant from California. I mean, the guy was just a total bullshitter literally from day one. And I remember in our last phone conversation, I got a really dry mouth, and that's because I knew I was having a sympathetic response. And my body could sense that this guy was just a fucking psycho. And he was. But he can be a psycho with somebody else. But it won't be with me. Oh, yeah, I remember this line as well. It's not the one I'm looking for. All right. Like I said, I think the quote that I'm looking for, I think, comes from at the end of the book. So it was about power. So I'll see if he has a chapter on power. Yeah, so he has a chapter here, chapter 19, called the Problem or the Power. Let me just look at that real quick to see if I come up with what I'm looking for. It's on page 97. Like I said, it was just kind of cute. He said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Periwinkle, I can no longer spend time with you, or can no longer talk with you. This conversation just doesn't have it for me. There's no power." Well, I guess I'll have to look it up later. But admittedly, I did a pretty good job of recalling this from 30 years ago. Let's see. Should be well highlighted. All right, well, I cannot find it right now. Even though I remember it very clearly, I don't, of course, remember exactly what page. But this is a good book. He talks about something interesting that I'll leave you with. Apparently he died in 1990. And one of the ways that he was able to reconcile his own death was to say that healing is not about health necessarily, even though a lot of us would think that it is. Healing is not necessarily about health, he says. Healing is about becoming whole. So that's another good take-home message from this book. I'm going to look only one more time because I just saw something underlined in red, which is, no, it's not there. Well, anyway, you got the quote. You got 3 good quotes out of this conversation. So I hope you're all doing well. Take care and try to survive our insane world. Bye-bye.